Good morning. In today's headlines, as a second convoy of trucks of humanitarian aid enters southern Gaza, Israel steps up its airstrikes in the north. The latest updates in the Israel-Hamas war.
Qatar's ties to Hamas in the spotlight. The Gulf country mediated a hostage release, but will American influence lead to the Arab state abandoning its connection to Hamas? A former Israeli intel officer gives us his insight on this.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin places an additional number of U.S. forces on prepare to deploy orders. Austin says the U.S. is concerned about potential escalation in the Middle East.
A bipartisan group of senators pulls no punches in outlining their positions on the Israeli-Hamas conflict. Find out what they had to say.
House Speaker candidate Jim Jordan is ousted in a no-confidence vote. We take a look at what happened and who's running next.
A family in Israel with one son wounded and another missing had a tough decision to make. Hear the story about their son's wedding amid the trouble in Israel. Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm Evelyn Lee. Today's Monday, October 23rd.
Yeah, and it's an interesting play by the Biden administration. They're seeking to give aid to Israel, Ukraine, Gaza, and the border, but progressives are only in part favoring some of those, and then Republicans don't favor those and favor the other ones.
Right. I think they call that log rolling or something, but we'll see how that works out. For today, though, topping our news once again are updates from the Israel-Hamas war. Israel's Defense Forces, or IDF, says it hit Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and 320 terror targets in Gaza overnight. It says that includes tunnels and operational command centers belonging to Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
ADF aerial footage show they were set up near schools, a mosque, and a United Nations building. This after a second round of humanitarian aid crossed into Gaza. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has the latest update on the conflict.
The United Nations said Sunday its trucks transported fuel from a UN depot at Rafah border crossing inside the Gaza Strip. The UN says the fuel will be used for humanitarian aid, including for schools and hospitals. At least 14 trucks of food, water, and medicine were said to have crossed Sunday after being inspected at an Israeli checkpoint. But the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, says it's only a fraction of what they need. It called the situation very dire for the roughly 400,000 displaced people currently in its shelters.
It's really a very strict rationing. It's even counting the minimum required calories per person per day for survival.
India's Ministry of External Affairs says medical aid and disaster relief material from India arrived in Egypt Sunday and was handed over to the Egyptian Red Crescent to be distributed. UN officials say at least 100 trucks a day are needed to cover urgent necessities. Israel is stepping up targeted airstrikes against Hamas targets to minimize danger to its forces in the next stages of the war. The IDF released thermographic videos of airstrikes carried out against Hamas targets overnight. It shared images of launch sites set up across from a UN building, schools, and a mosque. The IDF aerial footage illustrates just how close the proximity is. The IDF says one soldier was killed and 3 others wounded in a brief skirmish on Sunday. It says an anti-tank missile was launched toward an IDF tank and an engineering vehicle making preparations for a ground operation into Gaza. And in the West Bank, an Israeli aerial strike was carried out in Jenin on Sunday, leaving 2 gaping holes in the roof of the Al-Ansar Mosque. Israel says a compound in a refugee camp was being used by Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists to plan attacks. An IDF spokesperson suggested a precision strike, noting the mosque is still intact, but that the terrorists were not. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
The Israeli government released raw, unedited footage today of the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks.
The footage has not yet been seen by the public. It was collected from the body cams of terrorists killed in the horrific assault.
Israel's government press office held a screening for foreign media and journalists early this morning.
It says the footage is being released to address a Holocaust denial-like phenomenon evolving in real time.
And U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said yesterday the U.S. is concerned about potential escalation in the Middle East. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that warning, which comes a day after announcing the deployment of additional military assets to the region.
Secretary Austin said U.S. personnel have come under fire as of late, speaking on ABC's This Week.
Recently, we've seen rocket and UAV attacks against bases housing our troops in Iraq and Syria.
That's a development Austin expects to only get worse with time.
What we're seeing is the prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region.
The defense secretary says the U.S. is going to do what it takes to make sure that U.S. troops are protected and able to respond. On that note, Austin announced on Saturday the deployment of additional THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems in the Middle East. Additional U.S. troops are now also on prepare to deploy orders. Those deployments add to a series of other U.S. military movements since Hamas attacked Israel 2 weeks ago, including a U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors, and 2 carrier strike groups meant to deter Iran and its allies Syria and Hezbollah from opening new fronts against Israel. All that costs money, which NSC spokesman John Kirby addressed.
President Biden is sending to Capitol Hill a request for supplemental funding, all of which is vital to our national security interests around the world.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken also gave a dire warning on hostilities American personnel could be facing, speaking on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday.
We expect that there's a likelihood of escalation by Iranian proxies directed against our forces, directed against our personnel.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration has pressed Israel to delay its imminent invasion of Gaza. This to allow for the release of more hostages held by Hamas and for aid to reach Gaza. Qatar has been acting as a middleman for the U.S. and Israel in discussions with the Hamas terror group. For Americans in Lebanon, the State Department posted an urgent warning on X on Sunday night, saying, U.S. citizens who wish to depart Lebanon should leave now due to the unpredictable security situation. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The State Department is warning against travel to Iraq.
An advisory made yesterday says U.S. citizens face high risk to their safety and security there. It's warning against possible violence and kidnapping.
The Level 4 Do Not Travel Advisory explains that protests occur frequently throughout the country and that they can happen quickly without prior notice and sometimes turn violent.
The advisory emphasizes concern along Iraq's northern borders over threats of terrorist attacks, armed conflict, and aerial strikes.
A bipartisan group of senators has weighed in on the Israel-Hamas war while on a visit to Israel.
The senators pulled no punches in expressing their thoughts on Hamas and the wish for peace in the Middle East. Take a look.
Destroying Hamas is non-negotiable.
What ignited this hate and horror that is rippling across the world?
These were crimes against humanity. We are all involved in this. It's in the United States' interest. It's in the interest of the civility of our planet for us to stand united against Hamas.
The only people who benefit from Hamas's activities in this region are their enablers in Tehran.
Hamas hates the Jewish people and cares nothing about the Palestinian people.
Hamas doesn't just hate the Jewish people, like me. It wants to kill us. Period. Every one of us. The world cannot tolerate that kind of genocide anymore.
Hamas is a terrorist group, and we must do all that we can to support Israel in its quest to eliminate Hamas.
What we saw with regard to Hamas was an attempt to actually make more civilian deaths as bloody and vicious as possible.
Iran, Hamas, we stand here today to tell you that we are unafraid. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel.
How does this end? Israel thrives, they survive, Hamas is destroyed, and the Palestinian people have a better life.
The senators also visited Saudi Arabia and asked the Crown Prince to offer humanitarian aid to Gazans until Hamas is destroyed.
The group met with families of hostages and government officials. The senators' visit to Israel follows President Biden's visit last week. Stay with us. With Congressman Jim Jordan's candidacy now in the history books, we take a look at what to expect this week and what new faces are running for House Speaker.
And after criticizing former President Trump, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney hinted at a possible 2024 presidential run.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang green vegetable omega-3, greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
Introducing NutriBullet RX. NutriBullet RX uses breakthrough smart extraction technology to break down and open up foods like never before, giving us the most nutritious superfood drink ever, and get back to being healthy and well again.
My stomach issues literally went away.
My shoulder pain has gone.
I was able to sleep better at night.
I've lost 100 pounds.
During this TV offer, you can have the complete NutriBullet RX system rushed to your home for just 6 payments of only $29.99. You'll also receive this amazing bonus, the NutriBullet RX Hot Soup Maker. Just place it on the base, and the NutriBullet RX switches into soup mode to make hot, delicious, nutritious soup in an instant. You can have the complete NutriBullet RX system for just 6 payments of only $29.99. We'll ship the NutriBullet RX system right to your door for free. That's right, free shipping.
Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented the precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 75,000 procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Nearly half our patients suffer from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
It's good to have you back with us. Now we're going to unpack the stalemate in the House of Representatives. We're joined live by Lenny McAllister, a political analyst and senior fellow at the Commonwealth Foundation. Good morning, Lenny. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. So who is it that has the best chance at securing the gavel? Is it number 3 House Majority Whip Tom Emmer?
I don't know anymore. I mean, one would think yes, but it seems as though the fractionalized Republican Party, each faction is digging in. So those that are the moderates are saying, look, the only way we even got to McCarthy, despite the 15 votes, was with a moderate. You're going to need a moderate in there, or else the Democrats are never going to play along and even get things passed once we have a speaker. And those that tossed out McCarthy are saying enough of the status quo, enough of the type of, establishment politics that not only do they rue, but also the Trump voter rues. And so as a result, each side now is trying to dig in their heels and say, we have the best course of action. We need to move forward. And as of right now, this stalemate is going to continue.
So some people are expressing disappointment that Jim Jordan is no longer in the running, given that he had this track record of coming after corruption and going after the so-called deep state. But what can you tell us about GOP Conference Chair Mike Johnson?
Well, I think it's a little bit different of a tone. And again, it kind of goes back to the central theme of you have some people that are talking about draining the swamp, going after the deep state. You have these deep Trump voters, people that are really inclined to appease that primary voter that they saw won in 2016, hasn't won since, but it has a strong appeal within the Republican Party. Versus, and that's the Jim Jordan mold and others like him. I don't know if that's going to work, because playing to your base is not the same as getting things done in Congress. Again, we have a debt ceiling crisis that's coming up within a matter of weeks all over again. Now we're seeing the issue in Ukraine. That's going to continue to be a concern. We see now what's going on in Israel. That's a concern. And now people are bubbling up concerns about what is China taking out of all of this when it comes to Taiwan. You need a House of Representatives that's going to function, and it's not going to function without somebody that can talk to Democrats, talk to the moderates, and talk to the Trump base. And as of right now, I don't know if there's anybody that can really bridge all those three together.
Yeah, and Congress had to address the debt ceiling prior to this. But it's a government funding deadline that's coming up in November, and there's just a little bit of uncertainty as to what's going to happen without a speaker there. But I want to talk about McCarthy. The ousted speaker said that the chaos in the House is embarrassing for the GOP. So are they going to be able to do some damage control if and when they get a speaker and convey to the American people that they can get the job done?
It's going to be a very hard time of doing that. And again, to your point, Kevin, the American people, particularly the swing voter in America in 2024, is who the GOP really needs to be concerned about. You know, they're going to keep their base, and they're going to say that they fought this ideological battle for the soul of the Republican Party, and each side's going to claim victories to their group within the Republican Party. But it's those purple districts, it's those purple states that are really going to come into play this time next year. And all this infighting is going to cause issues. Again, I take people back about 10 years ago to the Tea Party that had this huge wave in 2010, pushed back against the Obama administration and their momentum from 2008, forced President Obama to extend the Bush-era tax cuts against what he campaigned against going into 2011. But because of how the Tea Party Congress acted, by the time we got to 2012, President Obama, despite a bad economy, despite what was going on in Syria, won re-election, and the seats that the Republican Party should have won to increase their leads in the House of Representatives did not happen. And as a result, you had a kind of a re-emboldened Obama going into term two. The Republicans are risking big victories in 2024, and it will hurt their presidential nominee in a general election. May not hurt with the base, but it will hurt with the swing voter.
Very interesting historical note there, Lenny. So really, is it just an impasse? What's going to happen on the House floor this week?
I think more of the same. I think at some point in time, somebody's going to have to give up. I think that the Getz group, if you will, they may have to sit there and say, okay, we proved our point. We proved our point. We're not playing. We will go along with you on this one, but we swear we'll do it all over again if we can't get a speaker that will coalesce to what we're saying more often than what we'd like. Now, the problem is, once they get that new speaker, they'll probably rescind that rule that allows us to get to this chaos so fast. McCarthy should have never agreed to it in the first place. He agreed to it because he really, really, really wanted to be Speaker of the House. And let's just be honest, if it wasn't for his own personal ambition, maybe he's not Speaker, but maybe we don't have the rule that brought us this chaos in the first place, and we're not going through this. Ideally, the next Speaker of the House will sit there and put ego aside and make sure that there's civility as much as possible and stability as much as possible in the House of Representatives, by way of making sure that the rules that the House operates by does not allow this level of chaos to happen so fast and so furiously.
Well, Lenny McAllister, it's great speaking with you. Political analyst and senior fellow at the Commonwealth Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney is hinting at a possible 2024 presidential run.
Cheney harshly criticized former President Trump on CNN's State of the Union yesterday and said she is not ruling out a presidential bid.
Cheney did not elaborate on her comments. She is unlikely to garner strong support from Republican voters. Other anti-Trump GOP candidates, such as Chris Christie and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, have failed to gain traction in the polls. Meanwhile, Trump leads by more than 40 points on average in current polls.
Cheney is the oldest daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. She said earlier she wouldn't run for president if she thought it would help Trump win in 2024. That included an independent bid that might take votes from President Biden. Cheney lost her bid for Wyoming's lone House seat to Congresswoman Harriet Hageman in 2022 Republican primaries. She lost by nearly 30 percentage points. Senator Bob Menendez is returning to court today. He is expected to enter a not guilty plea to a conspiracy charge. The charge alleges he acted as an agent of the Egyptian government, even as he chaired the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Menendez is set to appear this afternoon before a judge at a federal court in Manhattan. He stepped down from his post, leading the Senate committee following charges last month. Prosecutors say Menendez and his wife, Nadine, accepted bribes of cash, gold bars, and a luxury car in exchange for various corrupt acts. Menendez has resisted calls from more than 30 Democrats to resign.
It looks like contract negotiation talks will resume between striking Hollywood actors and studios.
That's according to a joint statement released on Saturday by the two sides.
Joining us now to discuss is NTD business host Don Ma. Good morning, Don. Good to have you as always. Now, please give us a quick update on the situation. Where do negotiations stand right now?
Sure. So first of all, talks between the two sides is actually going to resume tomorrow. That's what the joint statement said. Of course, this is after talks actually broke down earlier this month because the unions and media companies clashed over streaming revenue and the use of artificial intelligence. So now specifically, the unions ended discussions on October 11th, saying the actors' demands were actually too expensive, costing them about $800 million annually. That's what they're saying. They said their two sides were still too far apart to continue. And the actors' union, in response, said their opponents were using bullying tactics and said they were wildly mischaracterizing their offers. So that's the last of what we know.
Yeah, there's just a huge ethics question over there surrounding AI and what they can scoop up into their big databases there. So are the two sides likely to react in agreement when talks resume tomorrow?
Well, Kevin, I think there needs to be some compromises made in order for the strike to end. But we are, in fact, right now in uncharted territory because their union has never been on a strike this long, nor have they been on a strike for decades. In fact, before this, SAG-AFTRA says it's willing to resume talks at any time, but it doesn't mean they're going to change their demands. So, you know, it's going to be difficult, and I think it really depends on which side has more leverage over the other and how long the actors are willing to keep striking. Now, the only references we actually have to the current strikes is from the 80s. If we look to that strike, a tentative deal was reached with major compromises from the actors' side, actually. But, you know, in today's strike, the actors seem pretty solid on their demands. So, you know, Kevin, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get a deal tomorrow.
Some pretty unprecedented times, it seems. Now, I think you have another update for us. Please tell us more about that.
Yeah, long-term mortgage rates hit their highest level since 2000. This is also the 6th week in a row rates have gone up. The average long-term rate is more than double what it was 2 years ago. In fact, home loan applications have fallen to their lowest point since 1995. And increased rates and low-income inventory has also kept housing prices at a near record high. Yeah, so it seems like a lot's happening in the housing market, but that's it from me.
Yeah, well, hopefully Americans will still have access to the housing market despite all that. Don Ma, host of NTD Business, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure as always.
Coming up, protesters gathered outside the UN office in Geneva to demand the release of the nearly 200 hostages held by the Hamas terrorist group.
And how are Islamization, the lack of assimilation, and the Israel-Hamas war affecting public safety in Europe? We ask a professor about some European Muslims' sympathy for Hamas and the dangers of it spilling over.
Taking in Palestinian refugees or not? Why are Arab countries closing their doors to fellow Muslims? We explore this question when we come back.
One in 5 children worldwide are faced with the reality of living without food. No family dinners, no special treats, no full bellies. All around the world, parents are struggling to feed their children. Toddlers are suffering from acute malnutrition, which stunts their growth. Kids are forced to drop out of school so they can help support their families. COVID, conflict, inflation, and climate have ignited the worst famine in our lifetime. And we're fed up. Fed up with the fact that hunger robs children of their childhood. Fed up with the lack of progress. Fed up with the injustice. Help us brighten the lives of children all over the world by visiting getfedupnow.org. For as little as $10 a month, you can join Save the Children as we support children and families in desperate need of our help. Now is the time to get fed up and give back. When you join the cause, your $10 monthly donation can help communities in need of life-saving treatments and nutrients. Prevent children from dropping out of school. Support our work with communities and governments to help children go from short-term surviving to long-term thriving. And now, thanks to special government grants, every dollar you give before December 31st can multiply up to 10 times the impact. That means more food, water, medicine, and help for kids around the world. You'll also receive a free tote bag to share your support for children in need. Childhood without food is unimaginable. Get fed up. Call us now or visit getfedupnow.org today.
Bars should lock up criminals, not your back. Don't get the shakedown from lesser spine surgeons who utilize screws, rods, and disc replacements. At Bonatti, no hardware is ever used. 65% of patients come to us after receiving failed back and neck surgery at other facilities. With 98.75% patient-reported satisfaction, you don't have to be a prisoner to your pain. Bonatti succeeds where others fail. Visit AskBonatti.com.
It's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills, not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
Good to have you back. Dozens gathered for a peaceful demonstration outside UN offices in Geneva on Sunday. Protesters demanded the release of the roughly 200 hostages held by the Hamas terrorist group.
During this time of incredible sadness and worry and uncertainty, to once again...
And we say, Israel, I will go wherever you go. So out all together.
Let's be human. And so that's why we're here in Geneva, because this is where the Geneva Convention was formed. This is where all of the organizations of the world collectively agreed on when we disagree, here are rules that we should abide by in order to treat each other like humans.
Demonstrators waved mostly Israeli and also Swiss and German flags. Some held signs that read "Children aren't bargaining chips" or wore t-shirts with the hashtag "Set them free." Others held up pieces of cardboard with the words "Hamas equals ISIS, never again." 3 relatives of Israeli hostages traveled to Geneva for the demonstration and also to meet with UN human rights and International Red Cross officials. The rally's organizer chose Geneva partly because it's home to international conventions that respect human rights.
What security challenges does Europe face amid the Israel-Hamas war? And what effects are Islamization and mass migration in Europe having on public safety? To address this in depth, we hear from Professor David Ingels, a senior analyst at the Institute Zachodny in Poland. Professor David Ingels, thank you for your time today. Some say that if they take Israel, then they take Europe next. So what is the danger for Europe here?
Well, there is really a danger that is happening for the moment in Europe itself, because Europe is subject to an enormous evolution of mass immigration now for at least 3 generations. I'm not really sure if the Israeli case is now an immediate danger for Europe, but it is sure, as we have seen with so many Palestinian populations in Europe and so many Muslims with sympathies for Hamas, that indeed there is some effect of spillover through terrorism to Europe.
So how is Europe handling this, considering that we've seen bombings of synagogues and concerns over removing those who create violence?
Well, there's a fundamental difference, of course, between the situation in Israel and in Europe. Terrorism in Europe is rather, or Islamist terrorism in Europe is rather anti-state or anti-society terrorism. It is directed against the West as such, whereas terrorism in Israel is targeting Israel as such, Israel as a nation, as a specific identity. So Israel is not necessarily defending things like human rights or the West or a certain vision of Western values in Israel, but it's right to exist, whereas the situation in Europe is quite different because there is another majority different situation also between the Muslims and the European mass population. So there isn't a real symmetry between both. But when it comes to the handling of the situation, well, Europe has a big handicap which Israel has not. Israel is defending its right to survive. It's defending a specific vision of history, of identity, of the Zionist founding myth. In Europe, we have a very different situation. In Europe, a specific view of a humanist, free, open, inclusive society is dominating the elites and is hoping that Western values as such would be sufficiently attractive for the inclusion of Muslims, for the integration. And of course, this doesn't seem to be working. It worked 3 generations ago, but now with the high numbers of immigrants, with the growing radicalization, with the seeking of the 3rd generation migrants for their identity, with their media connection also to their homeland, and also the economic crisis and the high migrant unemployment, it has become very difficult to integrate these migrants. Even more so as the left is formally opposed even to the mere idea of integration or assimilation. The left considers that as being some form of Eurocentrism, whereas Europe itself is still strong, dominated by certain complexes of guilt because of the Shoah, because of colonialism, and so forth. So that makes it, of course, very difficult for Europe to act against the dangers of Islamization, of terrorism, of mass migration.
Well, that is very in-depth analysis from you, Professor Ingels, senior analyst at the Institute Zachodny in Poland.
Thank you for the invitation.
Arab leaders met at a summit in Cairo, Egypt on Saturday. Leaders condemned Israeli bombardment of Gaza, echoing European voices for civilians to be shielded. But no agreement was made due to the absence of Israeli and senior U.S. officials.
The meeting was called and hosted by Egypt, who said it had hoped participants would call for peace. Egypt also said it hoped for efforts to create an independent state of Palestine to be resumed.
The meeting ended without leaders and foreign ministers agreeing a joint statement. Thousands have been displaced on the blockaded Gaza enclave of over 2 million people. Diplomats attending the talks had not been optimistic of a breakthrough as Israel prepares for a ground invasion.
While Arab and Muslim states called for an immediate end to Israel's offensive, Western countries mostly voiced more practical goals, such as humanitarian relief for civilians. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Palestinians will not leave. Meanwhile, France called for a humanitarian corridor into Gaza. It says it could lead to a ceasefire.
taking in Palestinian refugees or not. U.S. lawmakers are split. Meanwhile, leaders of the Arab world are clear they're not going to accept any Palestinian refugees. NTD's Arian Pastar explores why Arab countries are closing their doors to fellow Muslims.
تشهده الأراضي الفلسطينية.
The leaders of both Egypt and Jordan saying they won't take in any Palestinian refugees from Gaza or the West Bank. Both are Muslim countries and border Palestine. However, they're making their stance very clear.
No refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt.
The leaders of the two Arab nations say they're not accepting refugees because if there are no people in Gaza, then Israel could just take over. However, some are questioning whether that's the only reason why they won't take them.
The Palestinians have a reputation for wrecking any country that they go to in large numbers.
Bart Marcoy is a former Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department. He says Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, Kuwait, and others serve as examples for his comments, such as a refugee camp for Palestinians in Lebanon, which he says became a breeding ground for government infiltration.
The Palestinian politicians were endorsing various factions within the Lebanese government, and they were supplying militiamen to the various militias attached to various factions within the Lebanese government.
Egypt's president gave another reason for not accepting Palestinian refugees, namely that Hamas members might come to Egypt this way and then fire rockets from Egypt into Israel, which would drag Egypt into the war.
It is a secondary reason. The primary reason is they don't want Hamas firing rockets at Cairo or Alexandria.
And it's not just countries in the Middle East. On Thursday, officials from Europe said they now want to send back certain refugees if they pose a security threat. This comes after multiple terrorist attacks in Europe.
We expect the European Parliament to provide a common position that would allow us to proceed with expedite returns.
Another official said the European Union already increased returns by 20% this year. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Stay with us. What is Qatar's role in the Israel-Hamas war? We speak to an expert to discuss the delicate relationship between Qatar, the U.S., and Hamas.
China and the Philippines are accusing each other after their ships collided ships in the South China Sea. Find out more about the latest tensions between the two countries.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, pavers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
Hi everyone watching at home. We're here to remind you that if you or someone you know were injured in an accident that was not your fault, listen up. We have live agents available right now to answer your questions and tell you how much your case is potentially worth. Hi, I'm Gina Bellich, here with spokesman and TV personality Tom Mustin with us in the Help Center. So Tom, phones are really busy over there. Tell us what kind of calls you're seeing.
Well, Gina, first off, thank you for having me here in the call center with you. We always enjoy talking to the viewers and getting folks the compensation that they deserve. You know, we're seeing calls about all kinds of accidents, but the most common by far has been car accidents. So if you or someone you know were injured in an accident that was not your fault, give us a call right now. You'll speak with a live person. They'll answer any questions you have and tell you if you have a case and how much your case is potentially worth.
Thanks, Tom. All right, folks at home, you heard it. Take advantage of this opportunity and call now.
My name's Jen Marshall. I've been playing professional football in a women's league for 3 years now. We're about 3.5 weeks out of my second surgery now. I had no pain whatsoever, no tingling, no numbness, and I felt incredible. I'm able to do pretty much anything. He doesn't want me pushing it too much, but I'm able to do, assisted pull-ups now. I'm riding a bike. I'm walking continuously at an incline on treadmills. I can do push-ups again. I can get out of bed, no problem. You're in great hands.
Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Welcome back. Now for some analysis on Qatar's role in the conflict in the Middle East. Please welcome Avi Melamed, who is a former Israeli intel officer and founder of the Inside the Middle East Institute. Avi, good morning. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
The U.S. views Qatar as a major non-NATO ally, so will that bond allow American influence to cause Qatar to sever ties with Hamas?
Look, Qatar is an interesting regional player. Though small in size, Qatar is quite influential because it has two major powerful cards to play with. One is the money, the wealth they have, and the other thing is Al Jazeera, the famous news network. And Qatar has been using those tools in different ways to advance its regional and global interests. Now, Qatar is particularly know how to play different arenas at the same time. Sometimes it brings Qatar to the verge or even beyond the verge of conflict with its neighbor. Like, for example, Qatar's policy vis-a-vis Iran or vis-a-vis the Muslim Brotherhood, the mother movement of Hamas, caused in the past for a rift between Qatar and its neighbors like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, to the point there was a boycott, an Arab boycott of Qatar for a couple of years. On the other hand, it also caused from time to time some tension between Qatar and the United States of America, but it never really got to the place where there was an open rift in the relationship between the two.
So do you think that now that Qatar has negotiated with these terrorists, and of course bringing these Americans home is a good thing, do you think that we're going to see more of this?
Yes, look, this is a very cynical, sophisticated game. Hamas has an interest to try and to play and to exhaust as much as possible the cards of the hostages, because as far as Hamas is concerned, this is one of its major insurance policy to maybe, in Hamas' view, to make sure that in the end of the day he will be still standing on his feet. So Hamas will try to exhaust that card as much as possible, meaning he will adopt a policy of like, oh, I'm releasing 2 hostages here and 5 hostages there, and I'm doing this great humanitarian justice. And Qatar will continue to play the role of the go-between, the mediator. And for Qatar, it's also a great position to be in because it gives Qatar prestige, it gives Qatar central location position in the whole story, it gives Qatar power. So it's for them, it's kind of like a win-win situation to a certain extent, because there will be probably a point where the international community and the United States of America will say to Hamas, enough with this stupid game. Either we are going to release all the hostages or we are done talking. And then Qatar basically will have to be in a point that they will have to actually, I'm not sure they will be able to do that, but they will have to put the pressure on Hamas to release all the hostages without doing this salami-style method that I was describing so far.
Qatar has been dubbed the hub of diplomacy in the crisis. Now, it also has a Hamas office in its country. Do you think that there will arise a situation where Qatar has to decide between the United States and Hamas?
Look, Qatar is in a place that, as I said, it can play all cards in all directions. If it calls for the time being, for example, to kind of like appease the United States of America and calm a little bit down the anger and criticism, and to avoid open friction or open tension with the United States of America, Qatar will have no problem to say to Hamas, thank you very much, now you have to leave. They did it in the past. They will do it again if needed. Qatar is conducting a real, a real politics policy in the region, according to its interest and according to its very interest in the region. So if it comes to the point that in order to prevent further tension with the United States, it will call for Qatar to ask the leaders of Hamas politely for the time being to leave Qatar, so will be the situation.
Right, and I want to touch on the West Bank just briefly here. The Israeli military said to have had attacked near a mosque there. So what are the optics surrounding them rooting out terrorists near a religious structure?
Look, it's a little bit ironic to say that. Across the Muslim world, thousands of Muslims have been butchered by their own brothers in mosques. But this is inner language of the Muslim world. Muslim can butcher Muslim or can kill Muslims in mosques or in cemeteries, it doesn't really matter. Now, in Israel, we got a situation where you got terror organizations like Hamas, ISIS, or Islamic Jihad, which is the same camp of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they are cynically using civilians as a human shield, but also they are deliberately, knowingly installing their rockets and missiles and preparations for terror attacks. They are doing that using civilian facilities. It can be schools, it can be hospital, or a religious affiliated facility, like in the case of Jenin, the mosque in Jenin, that, by the way, was accurately, when Israel attacked that specific terror cell that was right there beneath that mosque, completing its final preparation for a bloody attack on Israeli nearby communities, the Israeli Air Force was using a high-precision weapon to actually minimize as much as possible damage to the mosque and trying to hit the terror cell that was basically hiding beneath the mosque in a tunnel, and to basically neutralize them. And this is what happened. But look, in the Arab world, anything that Israel will do in order to defend itself, obviously, is discredit. It's automatically it's being, criticized for, and so on and so on. Even though I do have to mention and emphasize, there are people in the Arab world who strongly condemns Hamas for the using of its own people in Gaza Street, the Gaza people, for using them as a human shield and for using civilian facilities, hospitals, schools, kindergartens, and as well using mosques as places from which Hamas is operating, launching rockets, storing weapons, and so on and so on. So there are such voices in the Arab world as well, and I think it's important to emphasize that as well.
Well, it's fascinating analysis from you. Avi Melamed, the founder of the Inside the Middle East Institute. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
China and the Philippines accused each other of causing collisions in the South China Sea yesterday.
It's the latest in a series of confrontations between the two countries.
The Philippines claims a Chinese Coast Guard ship engaged in dangerous blocking maneuvers that led to a collision with one of its ships. The vessel was supplying troops stationed in the Spratly Island.
Another incident occurred when a Chinese vessel collided with a Philippine Coast Guard ship also involved in resupplying troops. The Philippines called China's actions provocative, irresponsible, and illegal.
The Chinese Coast Guard accused the Philippines of violating international marine law and jeopardizing the safety of Chinese ships.
China claims sovereignty over the nearly entire South China Sea, but in 2016, an international tribunal ruled in favor of the Philippines, stating that China lacked a legal basis for its claims. And coming up, a father in Israel makes a tough decision about his son's upcoming wedding. Hear more about their journey as they navigate through tough times when we come back.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
Two neurosurgeons couldn't figure out anything that was wrong with me or what I would need surgery for. Dr. Bonatti, without even seeing me, knew I was hurting, knew they could help me. First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
It's a painting that is peaceful. There's a lot of beauty in it. And you forget about whatever you might be worried about.
I'm Richard Karn, and I love my hose. It ain't those old hoses. This is my hose. The new Pocket Hose Copper Bullet, now infused with real copper, so your water is always clean and lead-free. Just turn on the water and watch your hose grow and grow. And when you turn off the water, away it goes. Our new inner tube uses 3 layers of high-strength latex on the inside. Then it's wrapped in a new polymer filament jacket, 3 times stronger than the other hoses, and I love the oversized, easy-to-grip fittings. Get the super light 25-foot Pocket Hose Copper Bullet today for only $29.99. But wait, call now and get our Turbo Shot adjustable nozzle, absolutely free. This is an exclusive advanced release of our 2024 edition Pocket Hose. Order now.
Call 1-800-617-2364 or visit copperbullethose.com. So call 1-800-617-2364 now.
After 15 years of smoking, Eva Marie quit. There's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking. Now start screening. Learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Good to have you back. A former congressman says several relatives of his were killed by an Israeli airstrike Thursday night.
He says they were sheltering in Gaza's oldest church. Former Congressman Justin Amash from Michigan is of Palestinian descent. He wrote on social media his relatives were sheltering at St. Porphyrius Orthodox Church when part of the complex was destroyed by an airstrike.
The church's father says the strike killed 17 people. IDF says a strike on a nearby Hamas command center damaged part of the church and that the building was not the target of the strike. Funeral services were held yesterday for a Detroit synagogue president who was found fatally stabbed at her home. Samantha Wohl was a former aide to Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and a campaign staffer for Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who spoke at her funeral.
Samantha Wohl may have been the nicest person that I have ever met or will ever meet in my lifetime. Sam did more for our community, our state, our world, our lives, in her short time here on earth than most will ever accomplish in 1,000 lifetimes over. And her killer will not rob us of the memory of her joy and warmth and kindness that she leaves behind.
Detroit's police chief James White said the killing left many unanswered questions. He asked the public to be patient as police examine available evidence. He said the department is using every resource available to further the investigation. Woes' body was found at her home on Saturday morning. A call to police alerted them of a person lying on the ground unresponsive. Samantha Woe was 40 years old and led the Isaac Agree downtown synagogue since 2022. Authorities are investigating a motive and ask the public not to draw quick conclusions.
More than a dozen people were arrested during a massive anti-Israel rally in Brooklyn on Saturday. Several thousand attended the protest. Police shut down traffic in the area for several hours. The NYPD says the Flood Brooklyn for Palestine protest saw protesters throwing eggs, fireworks, and bottles. Demonstrators lit fires in the street while waving Palestinian flags. Multiple officers were hit by flying debris. An NYPD spokesperson said some protesters pushed and struck some of the officers after a long-range acoustic device was used. Of the 19 arrested, 16 were issued summons to appear in criminal court, while 3 others were taken into custody on misdemeanor charges, including resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. They were later released.
A father in Israel is dealing with a wounded son with another missing in action after the initial Hamas attack.
Amid the family's suffering, a decision had to be made about his injured son's wedding. Let's take a look.
How do you celebrate the wedding of your son when you know that your other son is missing in action and God knows where he is?
Rabbi Doron Perez received an alarming phone call from his soldier son, Yonatan Perez, after the October 7th attack by Hamas.
He said, "Dad, I'm okay. I've been shot in the leg." He said, "I'm at Soroka Hospital. I'm okay." And you know, when they say that, you think they're not okay. I know of people who've died by getting shot in the leg and bled to death. I said, "How much damage is there?" He said he doesn't know yet. He's feeling fine. They're going to take him in. He said he's got a tourniquet on and he's okay.
But the family's difficulty doesn't end there. His other son, also an Israeli tank soldier, has been missing since the initial Hamas attack on October 7th.
Because my older son fought in the area, we had some unofficial reports that the tank was hit by an RPG and that there was one of the soldiers, was killed and the other 3 were missing.
Rabbi Perez and his family had to make a difficult decision. His son, who was wounded but out of the hospital, was scheduled to get married. There was still no word about his son missing in action. What's a family to do in such a situation?
We had a wedding less than a week later on the Tuesday. We asked our son and daughter-in-law to be what they want to do. They asked, what do we want to do? We all actually felt it was the right thing for them to get married. Firstly, thank God he was not so badly injured. He's got many stitches and he actually went to a top doctor who checked him and said it was a miracle, literally, that he can now start walking on it. So we decided that we decided to go ahead with it at the original time to get married on Tuesday night.
The family decided to celebrate life despite their personal suffering.
It's an impossible situation, but I think the Jewish people throughout our history have dealt with impossible situations, and individuals are called upon to deal with impossible situations.
I'm just so glad they were able to celebrate despite all those difficulties.
Yeah, I think that's very strong mentality right there. And I think it's, just imagine how it would be not knowing where one of your kids is. Just the sheer, just not knowing having to imagine what's happening to them at this moment must be really hard. That's in itself is horrific.
Yeah, and hopefully their other son is able to return to their family safely.
Right. And this is us starting our second part of the broadcast right now. Israel steps up its airstrikes in northern Gaza, hitting 320 targets overnight as a second convoy of humanitarian aid crosses the Egyptian border.
Additional missile defense systems moving to the Middle East and more U.S. troops put on prepare to deploy orders. We take a look at the U.S. response to the war in Israel.
Young Israelis are still coming to terms with the atrocities that happened during the October 7th attack. We speak to a survivor who tells us his story about the event.
Pennsylvania lawmakers are working to limit children's access to school books containing sexual content. What are the details of the bill, and what are critics saying?
We take a visit to the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House in New York City, one of the most historical buildings in the city. We dive into the history of the monumental structure.
Good morning again, and to those of you just joining us, welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning also from me again. I'm Evelyn Lee. Today is Monday, October 23rd. Now let's get into our top stories. Israel's Defense Force, or IDF, says it hit Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and 320 terror targets in Gaza overnight. It says that includes tunnels and operational command centers belonging to Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
IDF aerial footage show how they were set up near schools, a mosque, and a United Nations building. This after a second round of humanitarian aid crossed into Gaza. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has the latest update on the conflict.
The United Nations said Sunday its trucks transported fuel from a UN depot at Rafah border crossing inside the Gaza Strip. The UN says the fuel will be used for humanitarian aid, including for schools and hospitals. At least 14 trucks of food, water, and medicine were said to have crossed Sunday after being inspected at an Israeli checkpoint. But the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, says it's only a fraction of what they need. It called the situation very dire for the roughly 400,000 displaced people currently in its shelters. Israel is stepping up targeted airstrikes against Hamas targets to minimize danger to its forces in the next stages of the war. The IDF released thermographic videos of airstrikes carried out against Hamas targets overnight. It shared images of launch sites set up across from a UN building, schools, and a mosque. And in the West Bank, an Israeli aerial strike was carried out in Jenin on Sunday, leaving 2 gaping holes in the roof of the Al-Ansar Mosque. Israel says a compound in a refugee camp was being used by Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists to plan attacks. An IDF spokesperson suggested a precision strike, noting the mosque is still intact, but that the terrorists were not. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said yesterday the U.S. is concerned about potential escalation in the Middle East. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that warning, which comes a day after announcing the deployment of additional military assets to the region.
Secretary Austin said U.S. personnel have come under fire as of late, speaking on ABC's This Week.
Recently, we've seen rocket and UAV attacks against bases housing our troops in Iraq and Syria.
That's a development Austin expects to only get worse with time.
What we're seeing is the prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region.
The defense secretary says the U.S. is going to do what it takes to make sure that U.S. troops are protected and able to respond. On that note, Austin announced on Saturday the deployment of additional THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems in the Middle East. Additional U.S. troops are now also on prepare to deploy orders. Those deployments add to a series of other U.S. military movements since Hamas attacked Israel 2 weeks ago, including a U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors, and 2 carrier strike groups meant to deter Iran and its allies Syria and Hezbollah from opening new fronts against Israel. All that costs money, which NSC spokesman John Kirby addressed.
President Biden is sending to Capitol Hill a request for supplemental funding, all of which is vital to our national security interests around the world.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken also gave a dire warning on hostilities American personnel could be facing, speaking on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday.
We expect that there's a likelihood of escalation by Iranian proxies directed against our forces, directed against our personnel.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration has pressed Israel to delay its imminent invasion of Gaza. This to allow for the release of more hostages held by Hamas and for aid to reach Gaza. Qatar has been acting as a middleman for the U.S. and Israel in discussions with the Hamas terror group. For Americans in Lebanon, the State Department posted an urgent warning on X on Sunday night, saying, U.S. citizens who wish to depart Lebanon should leave now due to the unpredictable security situation. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now going back to life in Israel, we want to bring in Itai Bahar. He survived the Supernova Festival and tells us more about how life is now after the traumatic events and during the war. Good morning, Itai. It's really good to have you. Now first, how are you today, Itai?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I wanted to know, you were one of the people at the festival, as I had just mentioned. Tell me more about what you witnessed there. What happened to you?
So basically, we went to the party, me, my girlfriend, and a friend of ours. We arrived very early in the morning, almost 5 in the morning. We entered the party. We had fun there about 45 minutes. We set up a tent and everything. So we went and sat there a bit. We sat calmly. We talked. We laughed. Suddenly we started hearing bombings, and we were assuming at first it was a military thing. We had no idea. We didn't think it was what it was. But a couple of moments later, the music stopped and the sirens turned on. So we started running terribly towards the car. But a couple of moments, once we got to the car, we spoke to some people there. They told us to wait aside because there's a huge there's traffic on the way out, basically.
So when you were,
we stayed,
sorry about interrupting, but when you were running, were you already at that point aware what you exactly were running from?
No, we had no idea. We thought it's just missiles. Here in Israel, things like that, they happen, unfortunately. So we had no idea. No one really knew what's going on.
So when did it become clear? How long did it take what did you see and hear until you really realized what was happening?
So basically, after about an hour, we decided to get in the car and drive away because we seen the traffic has probably, there's a bit less. It seemed at least, but it didn't really get any smaller. So we got out the car. We tried speaking to people. And suddenly, someone came running at us, shouting basically that the army had informed him and that everyone should run towards the fields because terrorists had invaded the borders with all sorts of guns and everything. So we started running, basically, not knowing anything. But there was like a very very good spirit. Like everyone was helping each other. It was very nice to see. But even at that point, no one really knew what was going on. People were skeptical. Some people were panicking. Everyone was at a different stage.
What kind of help did you get in that process? Because I understand everything is very chaotic. So how did things play out there?
So basically, we felt like we are alone. Like we were running towards one direction, and at one point we started hearing gunshots from from behind us, like from the party area. So at that point we started running hysterically. Like we had no idea what was going on, but we were just trying to run away from the guns. And at one point, I remember like 15 minutes after, there were gunshots from everywhere. There were bombs from everywhere. All types of bombs. We just didn't know what was going on. It was a battlefield, and it's like we were in the middle of it. So me, my girlfriend, and 5 more people just jumped into the near bush. It was like a dry bush. We were visible. We were just hoping for the best because we had nowhere to run. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm just glad that you made it out. And with everything that you know now, looking back, how do you and your friends who went to the festival, how do you cope now?
So I'd say that the only good thing that came out of this whole war is that the whole country seems to have united to help the survivors and the survivors' families, because I think the families are as they were as frightened as I was in that situation. Like the fact I couldn't speak to my family, and I knew that they are basing their worries on basic news they're getting, and on the fact that they know that their son is at a party on the border of Gaza. So it was very, very difficult, but the whole country is really helping. People are like, singers are coming and singing for free, and there's all sorts of psychologists, and there's the restaurants are offering food, and they're really doing everything they can do to help us, because it's very difficult to to this day, till now, I still can't really understand what happened. Like, I just can't.
Yeah. I cannot imagine what you guys had to go through there, but that is indeed very heartwarming to hear what you just told us. Thank you so much. I understand it must be very hard for you to recall these images, so I really appreciate it, Itai Bahar. Hope you guys stay safe.
That's just Israeli resilience right there, how he's able to carry on after such a tragedy.
Right. Absolutely incredible. And at the same time, war is always, it claims all these civilian lives, and it's just heartbreaking to see, and also, of course, at this point, we want to mention the Gazan civilians there that have nowhere to go at this point, and everybody is just, yeah.
Yes, our sympathies to the families of all those who have someone who perished in Gaza, as well as those in Israel who perished during the attack.
That, of course, suffered all these horrific things, yeah.
So we're moving on now. More than a dozen people were arrested during a massive anti-Israel rally in Brooklyn on Saturday. Several thousand attended the protest. Police shut down traffic in the area for several hours. The NYPD says the Flood Brooklyn for Palestine protest saw protesters throwing eggs, fireworks, and bottles. Demonstrators lit fires in the street while waving Palestinian flags. Multiple officers were hit by flying debris. An NYPD spokesperson said some protesters pushed and struck some of the officers after a long-range acoustic device was used. Of the 19 arrested, 16 were issued summons to appear in criminal court, while 3 others were taken into custody on misdemeanor charges, including resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. They were later released. Stay with us another week. Same old empty House Speaker chair. We take a look at new candidates after Congressman Jim Jordan's foiled attempts.
And many states are banning school books deemed inappropriate for children. Pennsylvania is proposing a different approach to the problem.
And we visit the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House in New York City to dive into the monumental structure's history. So stay tuned.
Does this look familiar? You probably think this is what owning hearing aids would be like. Let me tell you, there's a better way. The Atom by Audion Hearing. The all-new Audion Atom is the world's first wireless charging hearing aid under $100. The Atom comes with an easy-to-use wireless charging dock. Plus, the Atom has a 22% smaller design, so it's nearly invisible when worn in the ear. That's why we have over 250,000 happy customers. Each pair has a 45-day money-back guarantee, so there is zero risk in trying them.
Call 1-800-918-3109. That's 1-800-918-3109. Call 1-800-918-3109 or go to audionhearing.com to get your pair of Audion Atom hearing aids for only $99.
Kindness is cool because we feel happier when we do good. Kindness connects us with others and improves our self-esteem. Simple actions, meaningful lives. Let's practice kindness, share our love, and show our care for one another. Submit videos of kindness to Gangjing World for prizes up to $10,000 in cash. For more more information, visit gangjingworld.com.
I use Book a Limo on all my trips. They have drivers everywhere.
I always feel safe when I travel with their chauffeurs, from hello to goodbye.
Checking rates, booking, and managing clients' reservations online is so easy.
The confirmations, trip reminders, and car status updates are great when I'm on the go.
I want my clients to have the best experience during their trip. That's why I've used Book a Limo for the past 30 years.
What's your destination? Book a limo, any car, anywhere.
Shen Yun Creations, the streaming platform from Shen Yun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore ShenYunCreations.com.
Welcome back. House Republicans ousted Representative Jim Jordan as House Speaker nominee on Friday. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and on who's in the running for the still vacant House Speaker position.
The move to end Jordan's candidacy came in a vote of no confidence. This shortly after the congressman continued to lose ground on a third ballot on the House floor. Jordan spoke after his ouster.
We need to come together and figure out who our speaker is going to be.
7 of the 8 House members who voted to remove former House Speaker McCarthy tried to make a deal Friday to get Jordan elected. Representative Matt Gaetz said they were willing to accept sanction, suspension, or removal from the Republican conference.
But if what these holdouts need is a pound of our flesh, we're willing to give it to them in order to see them elect Jim Jordan for Speaker.
Once Jordan was removed, Gaetz reacted on X, writing, "Remember that about 100 of the congressional Republicans who call me vile just voted for Jim Jordan in public and then knifed him in an anonymous vote in a secret meeting in the Capitol basement. This was never going to be easy. We fight on." So what comes next? There are now a whole slate of new candidates vying for the gavel. Let's take a look at some of them. First up, Congressman Byron Donalds, the Florida Republican and Freedom Caucus member, says he's seeking the speakership to advance a conservative vision for the House of Representatives and the American people. Here's Donalds on Newsmax.
I believe I am the leader that can get that job done.
Donalds is serving his second term, winning his first election to Congress in 2020. Next up, Representative Mike Johnson. The Louisiana Republican was first elected to the House in 2016 and sits on the House Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer says he's seeking the speakership with the goal of delivering historic change. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is backing the Minnesota Republican for Speaker, delivering an early boost for his candidacy. Another candidate is Congressman Kevin Hern. The Oklahoma Republican chairs the Conservative Republican Study Committee. Other candidates include Congressman Pete Sessions, Dan Muser, Gary Palmer, Jack Bergman, and Austin Scott. House Republicans are expected to hold a candidate forum Monday evening to hear from the candidates, but it's not clear if any of the GOP lawmakers will be able to gather the 217 votes needed to serve in the House's top spot. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Pennsylvania is one of a growing number of states working to limit student access to sexually explicit material.
Critics label such efforts book bans that are part of a broader Republican attack on public education. Here's more on that story.
Pennsylvania's Senate Education Committee has advanced a bill to restrict sexual material in schools. Unlike many other states, Pennsylvania isn't looking to ban these types of books from schools entirely.
We are seeing an absolute proliferation of inappropriate content in schools. And I'm not talking about, concepts and ideas. What I'm talking about are graphic depictions of what looks like children on children porn. This does not belong in schools.
The new law would reinforce a much older Pennsylvania law already in the books. It would require libraries to display certain books in a separate location. It also puts responsibility in parents' hands. They would have to give written permission to allow their children to access such books.
We have laws that say if you're going to enter a sexually explicit website, you need to be 18 years old. You can't rent pornography unless you're 18 years old. But here we are letting children have it. And so this is not a new concept. It's not a new law. It's the simple enforcement of existing laws saying that schools cannot give minors access to sexually explicit content. And if you're going to have it in your library, we are not telling you to remove it, but we are telling you that you better keep it in a different place, that you're not letting kids access unless the parents said they can go to it.
State Representative Stephanie Shalaba says much of the opposition to such measures relates to First Amendment concerns. As a lawyer, she has a legal perspective on the matter.
I want you to know I'm a lawyer. I did my thesis on the First Amendment. I respect the First Amendment. I know it's a slippery slope when we start to go anywhere touching the First Amendment. That said, obscenity is not protected speech. Hate speech is not protected speech. And that they usually get listening because like, well, yeah, right? That's a given. Sure, it is. But we also have restrictions on the outer ambit of speech that is protected, such as pornography. We don't let minors access pornography.
Shalaba urges parents to become aware of exactly what schools are actually teaching their children. Then, parents should speak to everyone who may have a role in the decision to display or teach such materials to their kids. She stresses getting involved.
It's just something that parents need to be aware of. They really need to get involved because it's not just books, it's also the mental health care, it's the guidance counseling, it's everywhere. Parents need to be involved. They need to step up and get involved and realize what's being taught in their schools.
The issue of inappropriate books in schools is not a new one. In the modern world, shielding children from exposure to such content is extremely difficult. Pennsylvania Republicans hope the legislation will allow parents to protect children from what they deem inappropriate.
For those that don't know, we are in New York City, obviously, and I have to say I really love this city.
Yeah. A lot of fun stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just love looking at the architecture and all the buildings. I mean, New York City, it's almost 400 years old, so it's older than the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, so stay tuned for some fun stuff. Let's go on tour. America may not have been around as long as many other nations and civilizations of the world, but it does have some gems from the days of old. Here is the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House at the southern tip of Manhattan. It is one of the most monumental structures in New York. Sightseers, history buffs, and all viewers gather round. We're about to explore some of its striking architecture and statuary with Pauline Fromer, co-president of Fromer Guidebooks.
Before 1913, all of the federal government's money came from duties on imported goods from all over the world. Because New York City was the most important port in the United States, 75% of the money that went to the federal government came in through this building. So you know it's going to be grand.
The building has 12 marble statues representing the seafaring nations above the columns, and limestone figures upon pedestals represent continents.
If you look at that over there, it's pretty clear that that is Africa. You can see the Sphinx she's sitting on, and because of the prejudices of that day, they had her represented as being asleep. The statue over there is both North and South America, but again, because of the prejudices of the day, South America is simply represented by a tiny little Aztec column that North America has her foot firmly on. North America is sheltering an immigrant under her cloak, and the immigrant is pushing a wheel which symbolizes industry, because they felt that immigrants were the force that were really making the economic wealth of the country grow.
A tourist from South America shares his thoughts on the immigration symbolism.
It is similar to what has happened in reality. One notices that immigration has been the driving force of everything that is America, coming mainly from Europe.
The European figure sits on a throne. Fromer says the figure embodies power. The figure dons a crown and is leaning on a massive book symbolizing extensive knowledge. And under those books is a globe, which Fromer suggests indicates Europe is running the world. Another passerby marvels at the construction.
I think it's incredible because it's a mix. This building looks really authentic. I don't know the years that it has, maybe more than 100 years. And if you compare it with the other buildings, I think it's completely different. And when you come here, your eyes are going to this building, not to other ones.
The building was made amid the influence of Beaux-Arts architecture. The architects who adopted that style emphasized embellishment and classicism. This forum changed the landscape of the city with grand buildings promoting a renewed perception of American strength.
Beautiful building and such great symbolism. All right, we have to wrap up our show here now, but we'll keep you updated with the latest information on the war. Stay tuned for News Today broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.